Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, carissimi giovani che vede così numerosi.
Dear young people, I see so numerous in this hall, and I'm so happy to see you.
Beautiful conference center today at the invitation of the community of Sant'Egidio. My name, as you see here, is Isabel Rosa Brunetto, and I work for the government of Monaco in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. And, of course, climate change, combating climate change, preserving biodiversity is one of our main topics. It's a great honor for me to be moderating this forum, which is titled today, Mother Earth, One Planet, One Humanity. To make sure you get the most of this forum, we have translations available. I hope everyone took his little device. And I will myself speak a little bit in Italian and a little bit in English. Ladies and gentlemen, for more than 3 decades now, the IPCC, maybe not all of you know the IPCC, but it's the Climate Scientific Committee, international, of course, intergovernmental committee. It has been warning us about the disastrous effects of climate change on the environment and thus on the human societies. Today, no single country can say that it can avoid the consequences of the disaster. We are all on the same boat. Yes, we are. And the bad news is that the boat is in the tempest. To name a few recent disasters, let me remind you of the flooding in Pakistan, the heat waves in Europe, in Asia, the major drought, but also the flooding in Africa, the fires in America and Australia. The list is endless. The COP27 of the United Nations Climate Convention will open in just 2 weeks in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh. Yes, 27 conferences of the state parties. 27, and for which result? I would also like to mention the 15th COP of the UN Convention on Biodiversity, which will also take place at the end of 2022, and that will tackle the huge losses of biodiversity. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis said, "The environmental challenge we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all." Then, as we approach these international political events that I mentioned earlier, which message do we want to send to our leaders from Rome? What can we do together to reconcile humanity and Mother Earth? Which actions are needed to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal and offer a sustainable future to the next generation? That means to you. How can we make sure the burden is not imposed on the poorest peoples of this planet? Yesterday, Andrea Riccardi said that we need to be bold. We need to have imagination to strive for peace. We all know that there can be no peace as long as the planet is sick. So to help us in our reflection today, we have no less than 7 panelists from 4 continents: Asia, America, Africa, and Europe. I will give them the daunting task of presenting their views in about 10 minutes. It is short, I know, but after the speech, they will have a second chance to give us more perspective on their topic. I will then give the floor to discussants and, of course, to you all to have the opportunity to raise your views or to ask questions. So, to start this discussion, I will first give the floor to Pakile Felemou, who is at my right-hand side. And I will give a brief description of his career, on who he is, in Italian. Pakile
Felemou has been director at Conakry, Guinea, of the Dream Center of the Sant'Egidio community, treating AIDS. In his country, he committed to education and inclusion of young people. He has been living in Italy since 2009 and is member of the committee of the board of Sant'Egidio. Pakile, you have the floor.
Davvero grazie, signora.
Thank you very much from the deep of my heart, Mrs. Rosa Brunetto. I have the privilege and honor to start as first in front of the distinguished audience gathered here today. I will speak about integral ecology that considers environment and society. Climate emergency is affecting the whole world without leaving aside rich countries like the United States that are affected every year from hurricane and flood, and Europe where we had flood and drought, as we have seen recently in Italy and in France. A lot is less is said about what is happening in Africa, where, just to give you an example, in Sahel and in sub-Saharan Africa, last month we had floods that we had never seen before. However, there is a great difference between the north and the south of the world. In the north of the world, when extreme events occur, more or less rapidly, reconstruction is started, while in the south of the world, each dramatic event seems to really leave a permanent mark, permanent trace, so much so that in these countries, the devastating events of the first catastrophes are followed by a second, third, fourth wave of catastrophes that follows. Their homes, transportation means, jobs, economic activities, when they are lost because of these dramatic events, are no longer recovered, and destruction is forever. There is no resilience, but just we forget the problem, as it often is the case in the big Western African metropolis, Lagos, Dakar, Abidjan. People die because their homes crash and collapse, because they have no longer home. These are precarious homes that collapse when there are heavy rains. And therefore, they're obliged to leave their homes. And usually, they live in the suburbs, very close to forests. Environmental emergence is really affecting them very seriously because there are no social guarantees. There is no civic protection, and there are no projects for town planning. There is a close link between the exploitment of Mother Earth and poverty. The Sant'Egidio community is present in about 30 African countries. And we realized how true is what Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, i.e. that there is a strong relationship between the abusive exploitment of Mother Earth and poverty. We have become aware that we need to repair not only nature, but also, together with nature, social human fabric, and sometimes not only of cities, but nations. When we go back to our history, we see that history is teaching us. Let's consider the Ivory Coast. This is a country that went through a progressive desertification caused by mankind. So it was caused starting in the 20s, when its territory was usually covered by virgin forests. On one hand, we had desertification, and what did it cause? It caused climate change in the country. And on the other hand, deforestation brought about a change in social components. In fact, it was important to have a lot of farmers to farm the land that had to move from the north to the south of the country. And this is now Burkina Faso, Mali, and other regions in the area. And therefore, thousands of workers were exploited, and miners also were exploited. We could say the same for other neighboring countries. Guinea, for instance, is a country where mines and deforestation cause the same damage. But at a certain point in the Ivory Coast, starting in the 80s, there was a rural crisis because crops were no longer profitable, and therefore a lot of people there was a flight to the towns, and people abandoned their precarious homes, and there are young people, children, who leave the urban areas and come to the towns without any point of reference. When nature is suffering, people suffer as well. The whole society suffers. So some ecosystems no longer have a balance, and these brought about some serious diseases like Ebola virus that was caused also by urbanization of bats. They no longer can take shelter in the forest and came to towns. Ebola, from 2013 to 2015, caused a toll of 20,000 people. Guinea, Conakry, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. War, last but not least, is the greatest enemies of mankind, but also of the environment. Just look around and see the problem of mines. But there is also an invisible pollution that seems to be harmless, but is very disruptive. And this is corruption that pollutes society down to its very roots. So in Africa, we only have a big corruption when you have to pay a premium or money just to have an injection in a hospital, or to have your folder be processed. And corruption is also present at school level. And this corruption is really depriving the whole country from its future. In the largest African cities, we have the help of Sant'Egidio community. Community is dedicating effort to educate people for the development of Mother Earth. In our schools, we have children and young people who are at the margins of society. We teach them because ignorance in general, poor knowledge and education is the main obstacle to a correct and fair relationship with society and the environment. But we should be concerned about the problem of minors who have not been registered at birth, with the risk of trafficking and abuses. With the Bravo program of the Sant'Egidio community that envisages the registration of these invisible children, about 4 million children were registered with the Bravo program just in Burkina Faso. We fight against an intolerable system of injustice that is polluting society so deeply and so disruptively that denies the official existence of a person by denying their very name. These two examples are very important. And this is what we call social resilience, socio-environmental resilience. And this is something that Africa needs very much. Another example that comes from our experience, this time in Western Africa. In 2019, the tropical cyclone Idai crossed the center of Mozambique very violently, and particularly the town of Beira. Still today, you can see everywhere the signs of that terrible destruction. But after 4 years, the only homes, about 50, that were reconstructed at the center of the cities were those built up by the young people working in the Sant'Egidio community to help old people to live in their homes where they always lived. And therefore, old people did not have to be moved to the margins of the cities in a social context that would not help them, would not be good for them. We could say that this is not enough. But I think it's a lot because it can be a contagious example. And there are many startups in Africa that deal with environment, recycling of waste coming from the land, and they offer alternative products to plastic. And we also have companies working in renewable energies. And you know, in Africa, the first renewable energy is the sun. Our youth, that are the real richness of African continent in terms of number and energy to be deployed, can be a great environmental and social resilience factor. But we have to really believe in this idea and invest. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Pakile Felemu, for this very concrete description of what is going on in one of the continents that is suffering most from climate change, and that is Africa. Resilience, as you said, is important because climate change goes to the roots of our societies. It goes to what we cherish the most, to our children. So we have to be very focused on fighting this catastrophe that we don't want to come to us. Our next speaker comes from a different continent. We are flying to South America, and we are welcoming Juan Grabois, who is co-founder
of the Confederation of People's Economy Workers in Argentina. He was born in Argentina. He got a degree in law and social sciences. He taught at the University of Buenos Aires. And he's volunteering as a lawyer and a consultant for workers' cooperatives and for farmers' communities. In 2016, he was appointed by Pope Francis as a consultant for the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace of the Holy See. And he coordinated the last 3 editions of the World Meeting for Popular Movements. We listen to him with great attention. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a la comunidad Sant'Egidio.
Thank you to the Sant'Egidio community for inviting me.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Good morning.
Buenos días, compañeras.
Friends, good morning.
¿Están despiertos?
To the young people, are you up? Did you sleep well?
Bueno, buenos días.
Are you okay? So good morning, everyone.
Y son compañeros porque todos los que peleamos.
I say compañeros because we all fight for the creation and for humanity and for the victims of a system that excludes people. Pope Francis taught us that the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor is one cry, as indivisible as peace and justice. The throat of Latin America and Africa, the throat of the poor world and the poorest of the rich world is broken from so much screaming, and the blood of their martyrs, the blood of their people, flows through their open veins, as Galeano said. The common goods and raw materials, they are both gifts of creation for Christian people, are appropriated by small elites or plundered by large corporations that do not spare any social or environmental cost. If we say that this model only produces death, pollution, and injustice, we are just stupid or terrorists. That's what they say. As Alberta Cáceres tells us, she was killed because she wanted to defend her land. Even if defending your own land is obvious, Pope said that the system is not affordable. Instead, we must prostrate ourselves in gratitude because they finance, and before they financial, mining, oil, agro-industrial investments. But Pope Francis also said that we have an excess of diagnosis. We know that sometimes politics and diplomacy and conferences just is hot air, just blah, blah, blah. And that corporations go on with concrete actions. They destroy our common home, our common house. So people of goodwill have to ask themselves, what can we do? I would like to share them some of concrete processes of collective resistance against the paradigm of discarding, where popular movements, social poets, Pope Francis calls them, created that land, that roof, and that job that the system denied them, while building a human alternative, people's power, which is a human alternative to inhuman and exclusionary globalization. I introduce myself. I'm Juan. When I was 18 years old, I had to go on through the 2001 crisis. I had just finished high school and I was starting my law degree when the big cities experienced an invasion, what the media called the Phantom Army, the army of ghosts. Who were them? Thousands and thousands of families making a living out of garbage. We had never seen something like that in our cities in Argentina. They were called cartoneros. They broke the neoliberal marriage. And they were a great sign. They reminded us of the discarded and invisible country for the middle and upper classes. Many of us went with them to the other side of the mirror. And we stayed them. We fought, not for ideology, but for reality, for the encounter with those brothers and sisters that our class and our system and our societies had excluded. With those bodies where our Lord Jesus Christ dwells. At that time, we formed a movement, the movement of excluded workers, one of the many popular movements that arose in general as forms of organization of people excluded from the labor market, excluded from the real estate market, and from access to land. I met Bergoglio in 2005 when he was a bishop of Buenos Aires. And he sought us out. He approached the struggle of the landless, homeless, and jobless. And this was the church that Francis is calling for. And we held the meeting of popular movements where the slogan of the 3 T's, land, tierra, techo, and trabajo, land, job, and a roof, started. And this says, no family without land, no family without a roof, no worker without rights. This is a slogan. I was with João Pedro Estedile from Brazil. We worked a lot in order to hold these 4 meetings. I'm going to concentrate on the issue of labor. And if this works, let's see if it works. Right. So we will briefly see that there is a huge mass of workers coming from the poor countries, middle-income countries, who live under an informality condition. A huge mass of workers without rights who are not recognized either by the state or by the employers or by the traditional unions. We as a movement try to group and dignify these activities and try to dignify their rights, and we call it popular economy. There are many movements, but I would like to talk about the organization that I founded in 2001. And it works. Let's see if it works. What I call popular economy. And it works like that. It organizes works of at least 100,000 people. And it has an important role to play in the unions, asking for more rights for workers. And it also has a political role to play because it fights to have structural reforms and structural transformation. And it works by labor branches. The first one is the branch of cartoneros y cartoneras. I have already told you about them. They recycle, and they are thousands of people organized in cooperatives. And I can tell you, and I take the opportunity of talking before you, to say that the proposal of law in order to reduce all the problems of the packaging have been blocked by Coca-Cola. They tried to corrupt the members of parliament of my country. Then there is a second branch, the branch of construction. These are work crews that try to improve their popular neighborhoods, shanty towns, slums, trying to build a new house, infrastructure. We do not have time to dwell on the subject, but there are about 2 billion people living in these illegal neighborhoods, as the previous speaker was telling us. And there is no planning in order to have new housing for them, neither for the poorest, neither or for the middle-class young people. So there is no future for the young people to have a new house in Rome or in Argentina or in other places. The cities have been captured by real estate mafia. Then we have the third branch. We have created 80 textile poles where people who were victims of trafficking or who worked in poor conditions in small home workshops still work. Now, thanks to this organization, we created cooperatives, workers are safe, and we created new brands. For example, this called the carpincho, from an animal, capybar in English, living in the wetlands. And because of the new construction, they were sent out of these wetlands. But we need to save these animals, and that's what we want to do. And then we have another organization of thousands of small farmers and producers that do not have access to land. They cannot build their own homes. And Argentina is a huge country. 93% of the land is urban land. But our inhabitants are very, very few. The original people were denied their lands. Small producers and small farmers were denied their lands because of the new crops, monocrops, of transgenic plants. And this created deforestation affecting us all. And then we have another branch, public spaces. These are thousands of people who work as street vendors, vagrant vendors, traffic light, or taking care of cars. They come from Africa, and they are persecuted by police in Rome and in Argentina. Because of their rights to work, they have no alternatives. And even if you think that it's unbelievable, I can tell you that those who file report in my countries are the huge brands like Nike or Adidas. They're really concerned because street vendors imitate their brands. There are fake products on the market, and this is just incredible. Then another branch, social community branch. There are canteens, picnic areas, street people, care books. We try to find people giving food to those who live in the streets. We have many communities to help those people who have addiction, for example, because poor people are always addicted and they use the wastes of the drug used or consumed by the rich people. So we try to free them from their addiction. And then the last branch, for all those who have been in prison and cannot find a way to be included in a society. And we try to help them with our cooperatives. I do not know if we have enough time. I want to respect the other speakers, so I will stop here. Maybe later I will tell you some of the important targets that we reached thanks to our social struggle and political struggle in our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Juan. And we have now a very clear message from him. No blah, blah, blah. Unite for action. Raise your voice. And no one is too small to be left behind. Another inspiring message will come now from Gillian Kingston. Gillian Kingston è la vicepresidente del Consiglio Metodista Mondiale.
Is the vice president of the World Methodist Council, born in Cork, Ireland, and she was the first lay leader of the Methodist Church in Ireland. She belonged to the International Commission for Dialogue between the Catholic Church and the Methodist and the World Methodist Council. She's also a member of the Irish School of Ecumenics in Dublin. Mrs. Kingston, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, buongiorno, or as we say in Ireland, diagwiv. May God be with you. Thank you very much for that generous introduction, though I don't know where you got all that information from. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of someone who is in a leadership position in a faith community, and that is a Christian faith community. And I speak from this position because I firmly believe, as I'm sure many of you do, that what we believe influences, informs how we act. And so I speak from this Christian perspective. And I look at the scriptures, which we as Christians read and which inform how we act. And so there is a song which says, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. And so we look at the book of Genesis in the Bible, and we read that the God in whom we believe created the earth and everything in it. And he looked, and he saw it was good. And in fact, we are told that he saw that it was very good. But as we further read in the Christian scriptures, we find out also that things deteriorated rather rapidly. And there was a great flood. I think we might now refer to that as a major weather event. And there is an exchange between God and God's people. And God says, I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign between me and you of a covenant between me and the earth. I will remember my covenant when I see the rainbow, a covenant between me and you and all living creatures on earth. But then you see, there's a catch. Because a covenant is an agreement, an honor agreement between two parties. And whereas God has been faithful to the covenant, human beings have not. And later on in the scriptures, we read that Isaiah of Jerusalem paints a very chilling picture of what happens when people do not respond to that covenant of creation. The earth is defiled by its people. They have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse consumes the earth, and people must bear their guilt. And that, of course, is what we're reflecting on as we gather over these few days here. David Atkinson, who is a bishop of the Church of England, reflects on the relationship between God, creation, and people made in the image of God. And he says it's a significant part of our problem that we have lost the understanding that the earth is the Lord's, and there is a life-giving triangle of relationship between God, God's people, and God's creation. We are a part of nature, and we depend on nature for our well-being, but we also have a responsibility to care for it, and that we have not always taken account of. I think COVID-19 has underlined and emphasized for all of us, as nothing else seems to have had the power to do, that we are all part of one world, one humanity in one world. And climate change affects us all. However, as has already been indicated, the effects of climate change are much more evident in some parts of God's world than they are in others. And it must be obvious to all except to the willfully blind that we are on a course to disaster. But those who are most vulnerable are those who have least contributed to the disaster. And herein lies a major issue for justice and equality. The Christian apostle Paul, writing to early Christians, says there should be no division in the body, but its parts should have equal concern for one another. If one part suffers, then every other part suffers with it. And a North African theologian of the 4th century observed this: "The whole point of justice," said Lactantius, "consists precisely in our providing for others through humanity what we provide for our families through affection." Let me repeat that, because I think it's very significant. The whole point of justice consists precisely in our providing for others through humanity what we provide for our families through affection. And very much more recently than the 4th century, Pope Francis, in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, says something very similar. To care for the world we live in means to care for ourselves, yet we need to think of ourselves more and more as a human family dwelling in a common home. Such care does not interest those economic powers that demand quick profits. Often the voices raised in defense of the environment are suffered, silenced, or ridiculed, using apparently reasonable arguments that are merely a screen for special interests. And Pope Francis goes on, "In today's world, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading, and the dream of working together for justice and peace seems an outdated utopia. What reigns instead," he says, "is a cool, comfortable, globalized indifference, born of deep disillusionment, concealed behind a deceptive illusion, thinking that we are all powerful, while failing to realize that we are all in the same boat." Now, reference has been made to this metaphor already, but I would want to suggest that we are all in the same sea, but it might be argued that we are not all in the same boat, because some boats are rather more better positioned to deal with the storm than others are. The United Nations General Secretary, Gustavo Antonio Guterres, has pointed out that climate change is happening now and to all of us. No country or community is immune, but as is always the case, the poor and vulnerable are the first to suffer and are the worst hit. And it is abundantly clear that people whose traditional lifestyles have been complementary are now competing for diminishing natural resources of water and arable land. And their fields and their villages are disappearing either under floods or through desertification. We simply look at recent news from Pakistan and from the Horn of Africa to see that this is so. Areas of the world have not had rain for 3 years, with prolonged drought affecting harvests, affecting animals, affecting people. There are raging forest fires and torrential rains and hurricanes. Ice caps are melting and ocean waters are rising. Many thousands of species of animals, birds, and insects are disappearing, and so the balance of nature is changing. We are making a mess of our common home. There is a story about Jesus Christ which the writers of the Christian Gospels considered so important that each of the 4 of them mentions it. Listen. It was almost time for the Jewish Passover. Jesus went up to the temple. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the table of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those he sold doves, he said, "Get out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." Sisters and brothers, young people, it is time for us, I think, to be consumed likewise for the house that the Lord has provided for us. And we need to ask ourselves really pressing questions. Are we angry enough about what is happening in our loving Father's house? Does exploitation of people and natural resources make us want to turn things over, turn things round? Are we prepared to act even if it disturbs and alienates those in power and with vested interests? What am I doing? What are you doing by the way we live, in the homes in which we live, to reduce our impact on the environment? These are the questions we have gathered to consider here. They are the important questions, yes, for older people like myself, but particularly for the younger ones among us, and there are so many of you here. We rejoice to see you among us. And many of us who are older feel we are responsible for the world and the condition it is in, and the world we hand on to you. May you be wiser than some of us have been, for the sake of the world, for God's sake. Amen.
Thank you very much, Gillian, remembering us that this world is not just a mere marketplace, and that we have to seek for justice and be not at all indifferent to others. We are changing continent again, and now we are in the heart of Europe, in the very center, if I may say so. Since we are having a speech from the European Commission, and more precisely from Michael Köhler, sitting on my right. And I will briefly describe his CV. Michael Köhler è direttore generale della DG.
Michael Köhler is Director General ECO, which means European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Operations. He's the new General Director of this new DG ECO, and he was a professor, and he has a long career of study and action in the cooperation for development and integration. He worked for the European Commission. He was in charge of the Middle East area, the Mediterranean area, and integrated maritime policy of the EU.
Grazie bene Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you all. I'm very happy to be here today in Rome. This is the first time that I participate to a conference organized by Sant'Egidio community. My Italian is not so good, but there are young people here, and I will speak English because we know that English is an international language, so I hope that it will be easier for me and that you can understand me.
I was really struck by the interventions I heard so far. And I was wondering why the organizers of this conference had the idea that between people of faith, people of action, you would invite a European official. I have to say, after listening to my honorable co-panelists, I understand a bit better. And when listening to Gillian a minute ago, I also remember that many, many years ago, I studied theology, which makes it much easier to understand what you said. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the link between humanitarian aid and climate change. But honestly, I don't need to talk any longer, because Kepakile has said it all. And I noted one sentence that you used. If I noted correctly, you said, La sofferenza della natura causa sempre la
Suffering of nature always causes the suffering of mankind.
Gillian gave us very good examples, and Juan told us a little bit how to react in this context. But this is also what I would like to tell you. I'm dealing with humanitarian aid. I'm the Director General of the second biggest donor of humanitarian aid in the world. I have a budget of 2.7 billion euros, which sounds like a lot, but I can tell you it is nothing. Because what you experience when you deal with humanitarian aid every day is that there is an increasing gap between the needs on the one hand and the resources that you have on the other hand. In the past 3 years, and this was before the war in Ukraine broke out, humanitarian needs increased by about 60%. If you compare the situation today with the situation 10 years ago, humanitarian needs in the world are about 100% higher than 10 years ago. And predictions have it that by 2050, and this is not that long time ago, we will have about double the needs of humanitarian aid in the world. Today, more than 300 million people, that is 5% of the world's population, need humanitarian aid to survive. There are more than 200 million people, that's more than 3% of the world population, that are starving, that are hungry, that cannot cover their needs in calories, and some of them are in famine, which means they are dying. And I've seen such people. Now you wonder, what is the link between humanitarian aid and climate change? And there I wanted to give you one little insight. There's a list of the 10 most concerned countries by climate change. And I just want to read them out. Sudan, Somalia, Pakistan, Niger, Malawi, Kenya, Haiti, Chad, Bangladesh, Afghanistan. And when you hear this list of countries, you also think of the big catastrophes, the big humanitarian crises, the big famines. Today, the main countries needing humanitarian aid are exactly Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. But there are about 80 other countries in the world where large parts of the population need humanitarian assistance to survive. So there's an intrinsic link between, on the one hand, the degradation of nature, human suffering, conflict, which is often a conflict over resources, over land, over water, over all the resources you need to make a living, to ensure the future of yourself, of your family, and then ultimately instability, war, and need. And you see this when you go through the big conflicts of these days. Of course, I'm not speaking here in this context about Ukraine, which is a typical man-made conflict, but think of the floods in Pakistan. Gillian already mentioned them. 1/3 of the population, 33 million people, are basically underwater, which means they have lost their homes, about 1 million homes lost, thousands of schools. The harvest is gone, which means people cannot eat, but they also cannot seed. They have no seed for next year. What would they produce in agriculture? Yes, their foodstuff, of course. But at the same time, they also produce cash crops, cotton. Cotton stands for about 10% of Pakistani GDP. In other words, if there's no harvest, there's no cotton industry. If there's no cotton industry, jobs are being lost. So it's not only about food, it's about livelihoods, it's about wages, it's about incomes, it's about people's survival. It's about 10% of the wealth of a country. We have many, many more such examples. The droughts in Somalia, and in parts of Somalia also have floods. And you have the worst famine right now on the planet in Somalia, in the Bay region. The floods in Western and Central Africa. When you watch Rai Uno, or 2 or 3, do you know that there are 19 countries in Africa that are flooded right now, with 5 million people that have lost their homes because of water? And think of food insecurity. I already mentioned 205 million people in the world that need food assistance barely to survive. That means two things. On the one hand, we need more humanitarian aid, but we need to deliver humanitarian aid as a means to help people to help themselves. Because with humanitarian aid, you can feed people, you can provide for health services, you can perhaps even provide schooling. But next day, people will be hungry again. Next day again, they need medicine. Next day, they, of course, need again hygienic kits. They need drinking water. They need their shelters. And therefore, humanitarian aid has to change. On the one hand, there's the famous slogan of the nexus, the link between humanitarian aid and development and peace building. We're working on this for many, many years with, I would say, partial success. But we have to continue. But what is much more important is that humanitarian aid can only succeed to an extent if it becomes more risk-informed and if it invests more in preparedness. Typically, humanitarian aid has always been a means of response. Somebody is losing home, somebody needs shelter after an earthquake, after a tsunami, somebody is hungry, and then you come in and try to help. But what it takes in future, I think, as climate change is going to continue, and as climate change is going to destabilize more societies, more countries, and as there will be more conflict in the world, unfortunately, due to climate change, is that we prepare. That we invest in disaster preparedness, in building local resilience. But this has one big premise, one big condition. All this only works if societies, if people are prepared. And once again, if you go again through the list of countries that I just mentioned, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, many other countries, what is the common denominator? What do they have in common? They have in common very strong environmental degradation and conflict. paired with very weak governance. There's nobody around that could organize the society in order to face the challenges of drought, the challenges of floods, the challenges of earthquakes. And if there's nobody around, then all the money in the world will lead to nothing in terms of preparedness, because preparedness is preparedness by human beings, not alone, not as individuals, but as members of a community, of a society. Now, we cannot change too much about politics. We cannot create peace on earth in one go. We cannot create nation states where nation states such as Italy have taken hundreds of years to become a nation, have gone through painful processes, and countries in the global south often have to go through the same process. But we can work with civil society, we can work with communities. Sant'Egidio can do that. The European Commission can do that. We can help people in their municipalities and their social groups and their trade unions to prepare, to get their act together, to go beyond their individualism, their egoism as human beings, and to organize themselves. And only if we do that, then our technical and our financial means will possibly have the positive impact that we are searching, that we can invest in disaster preparedness, and that we can prepare societies for the risks to come. And I think this is necessary. I have to admit, and I would like to conclude with that, that one of the most depressing moments that I have had over the past years is when I went on a visit to the research center that the European Commission has here in Italy, in Ispra, at the Lago Maggiore. There you have scientists who are inter alia projecting the impact of climate change on geography. And they showed me satellite pictures of the Mediterranean Sea. They showed me projections of how the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea is going to change because of global warming, because of the melting of, for example, Greenland ice. You know that if all Greenland ice melts, the worldwide level of water is going to raise by 7 meters. Go to Ostia, not far away from here. What does it mean? 7 meters higher sea level. But go to Egypt in particular. In Egypt, you have 80 million people living very close to the sea in the Nile Delta. And the Nile Delta is 50 centimeters, 60 centimeters, maybe 1 meter higher than the Mediterranean coastline. What's happening already now is that salt water from the Mediterranean is penetrating the sweetwater aquifers underneath and salinating the water that people need to drink, to feed their cattle, and to grow crops. So we have to fear a situation where there will be massive resettlement. Social order will be disturbed. Social systems will have to be rethought as a consequence of climate change in Egypt, but also in many other countries. This is typically a source of conflict. And if we want peace, then we have to work not only on the symptoms, but also on the causes. And the one thing that inspires me with hope in this context is that not only there are material resources to do that, but it's the force of human beings. It's the faith, and it's the capacity of human beings to organize themselves in groups, in social society, but also in states, to organize the work that is necessary. If we want to have a little bit of hope, let's look at our friends in the Netherlands. Holland, the Netherlands, is a country that since the Middle Ages lives under the sea level. 80% of the country lower than sea level. In reality, if nature had its way, there wouldn't be a country like the Netherlands. But the Dutch didn't want to accept. They built dams. They organized themselves as a society. They are a lively, vivid civil society today, and they learned to survive against the odds of nature. I think that is what we have to do together, and that is where also, in my job in the European Commission, we try to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Köhler, to make it so clear that preparedness is key, and that for that we need a strong governance, because the means do exist, like the Dutch have proved us. So if we don't want the conflict over the natural resources to be flaming the planet, we have to get ready and to prepare. I'll take you into another journey now, from Brussels to India. And in India to meet Sudhendra Kulkarni. Bless you. Sudhendra Kulkarni names himself a Gandhian peace activist from India. What did he do? He's un intellettuale e scrittore indiano.
He's an intellectual Indian writer who started his political career in the 90s. He was one of the most active promoter of Observer Research Foundation, a think tank in India that chairs. He's also the founder of the Forum for the New South Asia that wants to unite India, Pakistan, China for cooperation.
Mr. Sudhendra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Chairperson, my fellow co-panelists, my very dear young friends who have come in such large numbers, you represent the beautiful flowers of human civilization which bloom every season, century after century, millennium after millennium. Sisters and brothers, good morning. I'm from India, and today is a very special day for Indians because today is Diwali, the festival of lights. So I begin with a Diwali greetings, a short prayer which is special to this festival. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It means, Lord, lead us. Lead all the people of the world from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from mortality to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. The topic of this session, Mother Earth, one planet, one humanity, attests to the greatest crisis, hence also the greatest task before humankind today. Let's begin with some questions, because questions often are more illuminating than answers. Question number one, do the ruling elite of the world really believe in the ideal of one humanity? Are the political and governmental masters who take decisions in the leading nations of the world truly committed to the idea that we need to save Mother Earth from the climate crisis, which impacts every country every single day? The answer is obvious. No. Since the commitment of governments is weak, there is hardly any collaborative and coordinated global action to address global challenges such as poverty, injustice, hunger, development imbalances, wealth disparities, drought, reckless exploitation of the Earth's resources, pollution, and enforced migration. Question two, if we are one family, and we are indeed one family, why have we learned no lessons from the world's bloody history of wars and conflicts. Right now, deadly new wars are going on in Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, and there is also potential for new conflicts in other parts of the world. Question 3. Since we are in Europe, I would like to ask, why is NATO not disbanded like the Warsaw Pact was? And why are there attempts? And since I'm from Asia, I ask this question, friends. Why are there attempts to create an Asian NATO, which will divide Asia and cause new conflicts? This is happening because the United Nations has been made powerless to act against the offenders. Indeed, a cruel irony is that the worst offenders in several wars have been the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. They simply veto any action against them by the United Nations. Question 4. Why are the leading nations of the world continuing to stockpile ever more deadly weapon systems and spend more resources on military year after year than on people's welfare? Take the case of the United States of America. It spends more than all the 9 other countries in the top 10 combined, even though there is no proportionate threat to its national security. Militarism inflicts violence not only against people, but also against the planet. There is ample evidence to show that conflicts between nations severely damages the environment. Question 5. Why do the rulers in some countries, like the president of Brazil, think that Mother Nature's priceless gifts, such as the Amazon forests, belong only to them and not to humanity as a whole? Why do they believe that they can plunder, pillage, and destroy such irreplaceable ecological resources for short-term profits, with no concern whatsoever for what this might do to the one common indivisible climate of our one and only planet? Lastly, question 6. And this I ask as an Indian, because I'm deeply worried about what's happening between India and some of our neighbors. One of the most dangerous and most enduring enmities in the world is between India and our neighbor Pakistan. India and Pakistan did not cooperate. India and Pakistan did not cooperate even when the entire humanity was battling COVID pandemic. Such is the level of enmity and hostility. Similarly, when over 1/3 of Pakistan was under water recently because of the worst floods in history, the government of Pakistan refused help from neighbor India. I myself offered medicines to be sent to Pakistan, but the government of Pakistan said no. A team of Indian doctors wanted to go and help, but the government of Pakistan said no. I don't fully blame Pakistan, because when massive floods had caused havoc in the Indian state of Kerala in 2018, the Indian government had similarly refused help from Pakistan. The example of the floods in Pakistan highlights one more inconvenient truth. Climate change has been caused by carbon emissions from industrialized countries. However, poor and developing countries with high population densities and limited resources are the first to suffer the devastating effects of climate change. And as my co-panelist, Ms. Gillian Kingston, just now said, not all the people in the world, friends, are in the same boat. The boats of the poor people are unsafe, whereas the boats of the rich north, are better built. Friends, we can multiply such questions. but the conclusion we can draw from them is clear. Mother Earth is in danger. The children of Mother Earth are in deep distress. So what should be done? What should be done? Permit me to briefly present 5 ideas for action. First idea, we must boldly, unhesitatingly spread the truth that the era of nation-states with exclusive sovereignty is over. The era of nation-states with exclusive sovereignty is over. This is the era of global interconnectedness and global interdependence. Therefore, national exclusivism must give way to global inclusivism. Irrespective of our national, racial, or religious identities, all should be made aware of our primary identity as members of one humanity. Second idea, consistent with the idea that the sovereignty of nation-states should be curtailed in order to accept the higher sovereignty of one humanity, the world should move towards a new era of effective global governance, which means the time has come to radically reform the United Nations and make it effective, truly representative, and genuinely democratic. Let me give an example to show why the United Nations today is blatantly unrepresentative and undemocratic. India, as all of you know, is the second most populous nation in the world. Before the end of this decade, India's population will overtake that of China. Yet, India has no place among the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. In contrast, 2 European nations, Britain and France, each of whose population is less than 1/20th that of India, less than 1/20th that of India, are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council with veto powers. Why? Isn't this absurd? Indeed, I would argue that no country should have a permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council. And no country should have veto power either. In a truly democratic world order, there cannot be a norm that says all nations are equal, but some nations are more equal. Unacceptable. Third idea, politics is by its very nature divisive. Politics creates division among nations. It creates division even among people of the same nation. Therefore, political consciousness is incapable of cultivating the belief that Earth is our common mother, that planet is our common home, that humanity is one. Only enlightened religious consciousness, which means God consciousness, can give birth to the belief in the sacredness of Mother Earth and one humanity. Therefore, religious leaders and religious institutions of all faiths should intensify their efforts to push governments, businesses, and societies towards climate action, towards social justice, towards sustainable development, and towards ending wars and conflicts and militarism. It is in this context, friends, that we see the enormous and pioneering importance of the encyclical letter Laudato Si on care for our common home, released by His Holiness Pope Francis in 2015. Other religions should emulate this noble example. Ideally, all religions should together prepare, issue, and campaign for the implementation of a common spiritual manifesto to save planet Earth and save humanity. My fourth idea, science, technology, innovation, and green businesses are indispensable allies in the mission to overcome the climate crisis. It is heartening to note that promising strides are being made in solar, wind, green hydrogen, and other renewable sources of energy. Some countries, such as China, have also taken resolute measures to increase the forest cover and depollute water bodies. We should welcome Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent statement about the need to restore harmony between human beings and Mother Nature, and to move away from industrial civilization to ecological civilization. My fifth and last idea: to save Mother Earth and save humanity, the world has to abandon models of economic growth based on consumerism and greed. We should recall the wise and cautionary words of Mahatma Gandhi, the great peacemaker, and one of the earliest votaries of green movement, who said, and I quote, "Mother Earth has enough to satisfy everyone's need, but not everyone's greed." Mother Earth has enough to satisfy everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. Before I conclude, I would like to make a fervent appeal to the community of Sant'Egidio and all the participants in this meeting. Let's undertake a peace mission to stop the war in Ukraine. Let's urge both Ukraine and Russia for an immediate cessation of hostilities. Let's also appeal to the international community to end its passivity and make a strong and effective efforts to bring the war to an end. I thank you all for your attention. Jai Jagat, and Jai Jagat means victory to humanity, victory to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sudendra, to remind us that the United Nations need urgent reforms. And we all know that, all the international community knows it, but the movement is very, very slow. Thank you also for reminding us that we have to fulfill our need, not our greed. In our journey, we are now heading to, I don't know where, to a citizen of the world, maybe? To Jerusalem? So we are heading to Jerusalem since we have Rabbi David Rosen, who is the next speaker. David Rosen è nato in Inghilterra.
David Rosen was born in UK, and he was a rabbi of the biggest Jewish Orthodox congregation in South Africa and rabbi of Ireland. He now lives in Jerusalem. He is the International Director of Interreligious Affairs of the American Jewish Committee, and he has been promoting dialogue for more than 40 years, dialogue among cultures and religious communities. He is also the voice of contemporary Hebraism in the board of directors of King Abdullah International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue.
Having said that, I give the floor to Rabbi David Rosen.
Grazie, buongiorno.
Thank you and good morning. Sisters and brothers of the Sant'Egidio community, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry because I'm not able to speak in the most beautiful language in the world after Jewish language.
But I imagine that very few of you know Hebrew, so I will continue in English. It is a great honor to be on this distinguished panel. There is a consequence of being at the end, almost at the end, of a panel of 7 speakers. And that is generally, as the comedian Valentin put it, everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. You were meant to laugh. Thank you. It takes a little time with translation. The good news, and this is to the translators, is that because everything has been said, I will cut out a little bit of the text that the translators have received. From a biblical perspective, the world is seen as creation. That is to say, it's not just the environment, but it is the manifestation of the omnipotent creator and guide of the universe. And therefore, from a religious perspective, any degradation, not only of the human person, but even of our ecosystem, is a terrible offense against God, whose glory and benevolence are revealed and testified to in all the natural world and above all in its human summit. Thus, the current environmental crisis must be seen by us as a religious crisis that demands that people of religion and faith take a lead to highlight our responsibility towards the restoration and protection of our environment as a religious imperative, just as the President and past popes have done. Moreover, the crisis poses an existential challenge for our very survival, as we have heard, and for our responsibility to our children and future generations. In a conference that I attended a few years ago, of an organization of which I am president, the International Council of Christians and Jews, the subject was devoted to justice. And I spent a lot of time talking about the challenge of environmental degradation and ecological justice. At the end of my presentation, two lady professors specializing in Christian-Jewish relations came up to ask me why I should devote so much time to the subject of environmental justice at a Jewish-Christian conference. Obviously, I had not done a very good job in my presentation, but I said to them, what is the value of any relationship, any partnership, if we do not have a home for that relationship? Indeed, we might say that today, all other issues, as important as they may be, can be compared to the necessary repairs and rearrangements of the deck chairs on the deck of the Titanic as we head towards this massive iceberg that is going to destroy it all. The latest World Economic Forum's annual Global Risks Report presents climate action failure as the most severe risk facing humanity, together with extreme weather events and biodiversity loss that we have heard of. Humanity's broken relationship with nature has been highlighted even further by the COVID-19 pandemic. Scientific breakthroughs powered by international collaboration have helped us create vaccines and other treatments that can help tackle the health crisis. But our world continues to be vulnerable to such pandemics. Both habitat loss and the wildlife trade increase the likelihood that diseases will make their jump from animals to humans. Studies show that intensive animal factory farming that produces the vast majority of animal products on the market is the major factor in global warming and environmental destruction, more than all the forms of transport all put together. Our increasingly intensive agriculture and food systems require greater land use and are a key driver of deforestation. This also reduces habitat for wild animals, meaning they come into more regular contact with people, which increases opportunities for potential pathogens to emerge and infect us. In addition, many zoonotic diseases thrive in the increasingly warmer, wetter conditions sparked by human-induced climate change. Animal factory farming has been described as man-made pandemics waiting to happen. And massive quantities of antibiotics are injected into animals that are then transferred into human consumption, which greatly undermine our resistance, while massive amounts of hormones are pumped into these animals to resist disease and are also retained in their consumed flesh. These have been clearly associated with cancers, many cancers in human beings. The science about the ripple effects of this environmental loss have been on the table for decades. And now we are seeing real-life impacts, including, as I mentioned, the emergence of these new infectious diseases with increased frequency. With more than half of global GDP coming from industries that rely on nature, such as construction and food, the necessity for action to protect and restore nature, essential not only for a healthy world, but also for a resilient global economy, has become more urgent than ever. Unfortunately, the awareness of these nature-related risks has not yet translated into adequate action that would help head off future pandemics. We heard a beautiful presentation from Mrs. Gillian Kingston before, who quoted extensively from the Hebrew Bible about the consequences of our actions. Indeed, in synagogues, in Jewish places of prayer throughout the world, on this Saturday, we will read the passage of Noah's flood, the Bible presenting the flood as the consequences of human misconduct, human misbehavior. In the Pentateuch, in the book of Leviticus, the text is even more specific, and this idea is repeated many times in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Pentateuch. We are told there in Leviticus chapter 26 that we will enjoy good rains and harvests, and we will prolong our days on the land as a consequence of observing the divine commandments. And the Bible warns us of the negative consequences in terms of our harvests and productivity if the divine word is ignored and desecrated. The great 12th century rabbi Maimonides declared that the Hebrew Bible uses human language as metaphor, and therefore he understood these passages to be a way in which a simple farmer could understand a concept of spiritual reward and benefit. But today we can understand these texts really literally as never before, because the consequences of human misconduct on our environment are so strikingly evident. As we have heard, human greed, arrogance, insensitivity, and lack of responsibility towards our environment have polluted and destroyed much of our natural resources, interfered with the climate as a whole, jeopardizing our rains, our harvests, and threatening the very future of sentient life on the planet. Moreover, unrestrained, irresponsible human indulgence in modern society has not only led to far greater cruelty towards animal life exploited for human consumption, but also to further exploitation of large sections of humanity to serve much smaller sectors, as we have heard. Indeed, shocking numbers of human beings languish in hunger while others over-self-indulge. A recent study, you've heard some statistics, but let me just add something brief. A recent study concluded that the average person in the West needs 100 acres of biologically productive space to support his or her annual consumption of food, water, energy, and other resources. Distributed evenly, however, there are only 15 acres of productive land for each of the 6.5 billion people on Earth. That means that the average Western citizen consumes over 7 times his or her share of the Earth's capacity. Multiply this by hundreds of millions of people, and the human environmental toll comes into better perspective. I would like to conclude these comments in support of the wonderful things that we have heard from my colleagues in the panel. I want to conclude with a quote from the environmentalist Gus Speth. He headed the United Nations Development Program before he became Dean of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. He wrote, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are not those. The problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that." End of quote. But that is precisely what religion should be all about. Religion should all be about spiritual transformation and the nurturing of positive ethical values of respect for human beings and for the creation as a whole, a truly human ecology. Accordingly, it is the responsibility of all our traditions, and we must be united in this challenge. The responsibility of all of us to work together to be greater than the sum of our different parts in changing the orientation and the habits, especially in our so-called developed world in the West, to live in accordance with the sublime and sustainable social teachings of our different traditions, of modesty, self-sufficiency, respect for the well-being of others, and for God's creation as a whole. This we must do for our own security, for our own survival, for future generations, and to testify to the glory of the Creator's work and presence in our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Rosen, and maybe one day we find scientists to help us redeem our selfishness, greed, etc. But today we have to rely, as you said, on religion to help us. Last but not least, another jump over the ocean, and we go back to South America to meet with Joe Pedro Stedille. He's coordinatore nazionale del movimento.
Who is a national coordinator of rural landless workers. He was born in Brazil, in Lake Bromé. He's an economist and social activist coming from Brazil. He's the son of Italian farmers, Italian origin. Since 1984, he participated in the foundation of landless rural workers movement, and he's today the national coordinator of this movement. He is also a member of international movement like Via Campesina, Asamblea Nacional dos Pobres, and Alba Movimientos. Recently, he also participated in the fourth Encuentro de los Movimientos Populares with Pope Francis.
Mr. Stedille, please.
Buenos días, compañeros y compañeras, hermanos.
First of all, good day, brothers and sisters. I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in a conference with many so wise people. I am a practical man, and farmer people are always very practical, and we are here to speak about our concerns in facing the problems that we're encountering all around the world. That is to say, the fight for our life. What is happening is that human beings really are risking their life. The earth will follow and in the light of the sun. But if we continue like this, most probably we will disappear as human beings, as human race. And this is only us to be blamed for this. When I was young, in Brazil, we had the farmers' movement that was set up in the light of the liberation movement that helped us to interpret the world according to the methodology of looking for what is happening, looking around us and taking actions, and proposing ourselves to do things and change things around us. We talked about diagnosis, about the reality. I could spend the whole day talking about environmental crimes perpetrated in Brazil against the Amazonian forest, against people. There are 33 million people starving every day, and there are Indians and environmentalists that have been killed. But you are all aware of that. Now, I want to talk about why all this is happening. Who are those responsible for these crimes? Otherwise, we just talk in theoretical terms. And I dare you to take the opportunity of using this tribune in order to make an accusation. Those responsible for the current situation are, first of all, multinational, transnational companies, capitalists, coming from the north of Europe, multinational mining industries, agrotoxical product industries. Brazil is overwhelmed by poison, killing people, killing biodiversity, causing cancer. And who are the producers? Bayer, BAS, Syngenta, European companies. And they make profits from that. They make profit from our death in order to help the rich people to live better. But governments are responsible too, because they protect these companies and their aggressions under the law. The third responsible is the press, hiding the real responsible, hiding crimes and generating illusion in the people of the earth. Fourth, international bodies are responsible too. We have already heard. Why do we have 26 conferences of the parties? What have we achieved? Nothing. And do you know why? Because governments attend these conferences and they want to protect capitalist businesses that are the true aggressors. So it's total hypocrisy. This is a theater. They sign protocols and agreements, but the situation doesn't change practically in our environment. That's why I want to commend the courage of Petro, the new president of Colombia, that launched an accusation against those responsible for the environmental crimes in Colombia and Latin America. And he did that at the UN General Assembly. And I also commend and welcome the wise words of Pope Francis that are an important tool for education, and the encyclical Laudato Si. No Christian can actually define himself or herself as a Christian if he or she doesn't study the encyclical in order to understand what is happening, why there are these aggressions to nature. We have
translated the encyclical in Portuguese, and we have distributed the encyclical to our youth, to our young people, in order to help them understand and study and interpret what happens in the world right now. And lastly, what can we do? That's the question. I want to join the preoccupations and the concerns of my friend from India. And we have always debated in the campesino movement, and I dare to formulate some practical ideas of what we can and we must do in order to save the life of our planet and the life on our planet. First of all, it is necessary to stop deforestation. We do not need to cut trees. On the contrary, we need a world project of reforestation. We need trees. Trees protect life. Trees protect water. Trees provide oxygen. That's why we need a global effort in order to fight all forms of deforestation everywhere in all corners of the world. On the other hand, we need reforestation for a program. We need to plant trees. If you have doubt, plant a tree. Plant a tree in the garden of your house or in any other place. We want to stop the use of our toxic products. How can we still produce poisons? German companies selling poisons are the same making gas for concentration camps during the Second World War. And now it seems that they are not responsible. I am referring to Bayer and Bus. They perpetrate these crimes producing agrotoxical products. Why do we need them? They kill life. They kill biodiversity. They poison war. They pollute nature. So it is necessary to forbid the use of agrotoxical products. We have been spending 10 million years cultivating foods and life. And we are still saying that we need agrotoxical products in order to produce. It's false. It's a universal lie. We want to stop all this. Above all, in the areas of the indigenous people, mining is necessary, but it is necessary to have rules and to respect the interests of the people. Mining cannot depend on the profits. In Brazil, we have many companies searching gold in different areas, killing Indians. And who buys this gold? British or Canadian companies. They are too responsible for indirectly financing these crimes. As you know, a few weeks ago, 2 environmentalists were killed in the Amazonian forest because they were denouncing this. A British news journalist and a civil servant of Brazil. They were threatened and they were killed. So, we have to stop the use of plastic. In the packaging where we have for our food or for water, it's useless. I'm happy because we have glass water bottles here and it's possible to reuse it. And I'm happy that the water is not made by Nestlé, because Nestlé is one of the companies producing water all over the world, and it gains much money by producing water than by producing milk. So we have to declare natural goods as universal goods. If it's not possible to break the political frontiers of the states, we need to declare that natural goods are common goods, as Pope Francis says, as Evo Morales was saying. We want to defend the idea that in agriculture, as Rabbi was saying, in agriculture it is necessary to change the way of producing. We need agroecological production in order to have safe food. Food is important for our life. So if we eat poisoned food, we will have disease. So the only way to save food and to have a healthy life is producing in an agroecological way. We need to have another idea of water. Water cannot be a good in a market. Market comes from nature. Why does Nestlé want to say that it is the owner of water? Water is a right. Water is a right for everyone. And I propose that the cost of the programs in order to save our life is paid by the financial capitals, by the banks, by investment funds of the North that just want to make profits. We need to control these capitals. We cannot go on this way with tax havens, financial speculations, without having public control, sanctions on this capital flows, capital movement, and use also part of these resources in order to save life. And together with life, save planet. Because those who suffer the most because of this environmental aggression are poor people, workers, indigenous people, those who live in the south of the world. So we hope, and I want to launch a provocation here in Sant'Egidio, to summon a big world conference on environment without inviting governments, because they're useless. We need a conference with religious people, churches, people like us here, but also those who work in science and in university, and people's movement. No one listens to the people. Everyone wants to talk on behalf of the people, but they don't want to listen to us. But we, the people, we know a lot, and we have our own forms of organization. I want to conclude by taking the opportunity of talking here, asking you solidarity towards the people of Haiti, victim of French colonialism. The people of Haiti are paying right now the price of colonization. And what is the proposal to solve the tragedy of Haiti? Another military intervention? No, we do not need weapons. We need books. And we hope to change something in Brazil.
Nosotros estamos en una lucha electoral.
We are in the midst of an electoral struggle. We hope Lula to be the next president, and I want to commit myself in granting that Lula will commit himself to save life and change habits of production.
Muchas gracias, indeed. thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. We know that fertilizers with killers, plastic, are killing us. So what are we waiting for? That's the question now for a movement that you're asking for, that you're wishing for, and that we hope will take place. It's been a long presentation, and it's already 11:45 almost. So I've been asked by 3 persons to take the floor. So maybe if my panelists do agree, I will give them the floor before and then come back to you. And the 3 discussants are, first of all, Mr. Swami Amarananda. Is he here? Okay. Will he have a microphone, or does he have to come? He will come to the floor.
Whenever you say.
Mr. Swami Amarananda is from the Ramakrishna Math and Mission in Switzerland. The floor is yours, sir.
Greetings of Holi to you all. This is the Holi means, as has been said, the festival of lights. Now, I am thankful to the 7 panelists who have illumined our ideas about the problems we face today. And especially to Mr. Kulkarni, because he highlighted a point which I wanted also to do. Now, this is not a new knowledge that we are living in the same planet. But this knowledge has very recently come to the forefront of our consciousness because of the many things, financial crisis, this pandemic, and other things. And what is the main point I see that our knowledge is increasing at a very fast pace, especially, for example, in communications, in biosciences, and about the knowledge regarding the future of our universe. Universe in the big, not only this earth, this universe. So, but human beings, certain human beings in the history have reached the pinnacle of wisdom already. We do not need research into it, but this wisdom is bypassed, is always. Knowledge is increasing at a fast pace, and this wisdom is not applied, so knowledge is power, so wisdom can guide this power in the exercise of this power. So this is the main problem. So as I see it, you see the main point of Mr. Kulkarni, this world governance, it is a utopian idea just at this moment, but it has to come. It has to come. I do not know when it will come, maybe in 100 or 200 years. 100 is a very short time, 100 years for human civilization history to be remodeled. These nation states are obsolete today because each nation is looking to the interests of its own. So that way the world cannot go. So that is my point. I again thank Mr. Kulkarni to highlight this point, this idea of world governance and a new kind of United Nations. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amarananda. And now I would like to give the floor to Il Signore Alberto Aprea.
Mr. Alberto Aprea, who is the president of the Buddhist Italian Institute, Sokara Kai. Thank you so much to everyone. First of all, good day. I would like to thank the Sant'Egidio community for having organized this very important event that gathers many people from different races, religions, and countries, backgrounds. It's a precious opportunity to encounter new people and look at the pressing questions for all of us. Today, more than ever, it's important to go back to mankind and cultivate friendship and dialogue between religions and states to put an end to conflicts and bring about a peaceful world. Master Tuikeda, who is the president of our community, says it is necessary to accept and look at the diversity of each creed and at the same time understand the in-depth knowledge of each doctrine. And this way, each religion can really have a positive impact on others and become a religion dedicated to happiness of mankind. Each year, starting from 1983, Master Sant'Egidio is proposing peace to United Nations, and the leaders are all around the world suggesting ideas and concrete solutions and paving new ways for cooperation, for peaceful, sustainable cohabitation. And the master is mentioning a Buddhist parable that shows how all phenomena of the world interact, causing perfect harmony. And he writes, in the Rinda kingdom, sign of natural forces and nourish life, there is a network. Each knot has a jewel. Each jewel is mirroring the shine of the others, and the network becomes something shiny and wonderful. This shows interdependence of mankind, and this is deeply profound in Buddhism, showing the deeper interconnection of mankind and the interconnection, interdependence. So what is important in this vision is understanding that happiness and dignity of people cannot bloom in isolation, and individuals can really enjoy the real happiness of life with a kind heart, supporting each other in the moment of great difficulties. As Buddha Nishani wrote, if you lit a lamp for someone, his light will enlighten also your way and path. And I would like to quote Pope Francis, who say, taking care of the world around us, supporting us, means taking care of ourselves. But we need to have in ourselves that inhabits the common home. Mankind and nature are interconnected, and the certification of the natural environment is reflecting the certification of our souls. The only way to protect Mother Earth and having a long-lasting peace is by changing deeply within us, changing the principles of our heart. Furthermore, if we consider the task in front of us, we need our young generation to be deeply committed. On June 6, 1988, Adolfo Paris wrote, and Master Ikeda submitted an appeal to the youth, an appeal that is bringing about cooperation between our community and other religious confessions. And I quote, we speak to the youth of the world, be united and face together the great challenges and be constructor of your life and the history of the new millennium. In order to reach these goals, young people have to work all together and commit themselves in a dynamic way to face the planet challenges as getting rid of nuclear powers and weapons, fight for Mother Earth and dignity of mankind. To conclude, I would like to confirm the urgency of spreading the solidarity of action and to convey the spirit to the next generation. I'm deeply convinced that the passion and determination of young people will be the driver to create a century of peace and new hope. I express my best wishes to all of you. You decided to participate, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Aprea. And now I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Serafim Kikotis, who is the Metropolita Ortodoxo Metropolita Ortodosso del Patriarcato di Alessandria.
From Alexandria.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you today. Before to come here, there was a news of the international media that Mr. Macron is going to come here, but he's not going to meet the new prime minister elected by the people of Italy. But today in the news, there is the information that the President Macron met the new elected prime minister, and they agreed to work together to protect the humanity in Europe, but the whole world. And we are grateful for this to the community of Sant'Egidio. You see how we come here in order to find what all the speakers mentioned, the importance of working together. Of course, I disagree 100% when we try to say that the United Nations is not the place to work together. Today is the 77th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. And there were only 50 countries who were there. And one of the important Secretary Generals, Mr. Dan Hammarskjöld, if I pronounce properly his name, he said, the United Nations created not to take humankind to the heavens, but to save the humanity for the hell, for the colossus. Today, my friend from India, and I'm happy that we are together for the last years in these forums, he has a dream. So, my friend, what is our role here, all of us? Jerusalem, Argentina, Brazil, Europe, the Christian Voice from Ireland. I was there and I felt the pain when the people, they were not together. How can we influence our politicians and leaders in the place where we live, in our community, to work for the implementation of the resolutions of the General Assembly of the United Nations for Sustainable Development? In 8 years, we are going to fail to do what we decided on international level. and the time is going back. 200 years ago, the population of the world were 1 billion. About 10% are immigrants. So there were only 100 million immigrants and refugees. Today we are nearly 8 billion. That means we are together 800 million refugees and immigrants. The second role of you and of me, of everybody here, is to work for the implementation of the Paris Global Agreement. There was money after the pandemic, a lot of money. And then we expected to have solidarity between us after these sufferings. But unfortunately, we have this crazy war, the invasion of the Russians in Ukraine. And now I come to your point about the veto. We have to discuss that the veto, the role of the veto in the International Community Security Council is for implementation of the international law, not to block the protection of the people. But I agree with my friend from Africa. We have to see that any violation of human rights, and the water is a human right. In Zimbabwe, where I live, many kids, they don't have water. They don't have even a small bread to eat. Professor Andrea Riccardi, he mentioned last week that the problem of the lack of democracy is the cost we pay, all of us. And democracy is when we exploit the resources of one country and we keep silence. And we forget that we punish the 95% of the population, and the 5% of the corrupt people enjoy everything. Us, the other people, live in another one planet. You mentioned, all of you, and thank you very much, that we have only one house. I remember for many years my brother from Jerusalem. But who hears your voice? How can we influence the politicians? Yesterday, I was very impressed by the President Macron, but at the same time, to tell you the truth, I was confused. I realized that our leaders are not together. And why they are not together? Because we fail as faith communities to influence our leaders in every country to be together, to have national unity. In Britain, it's a record. In 5 years to have, I don't remember how many ministers. In the United States, you remember what happened after the elections? There were demonstrations. In the House of Representatives, in the place of democracy, there were violence. Everywhere. Now we are waiting how many days to have the new prime minister here. In Germany, the same. So the lesson we got, if you agree, sorry for this, when somebody is more than 2 terms on power, is very dangerous. In the ancient democracy in Athens, when they elected the members of the courts, they elected them only for 30 days, not to have chance for corruption. So I agree with my friend here that we have anthropogenic negative activities for the situation we came to this point. The humans, among the living organizations in these planets, we are only the 0.01%. But we are responsible for 99.9% for all the destructions. So I call myself this, in the meaning of the Bible, ecological sins. So we need ecological repentance, ecological metanoia. And what do we mean by that? To change the way of thinking and the way of living. So we have to think about, I was talking before to come here with my friends there, Laura, Alexia, and Abba from Sheikh, where we are going to have the conference of the parties in a few days. And you know, we started thinking about the Angrat Schindler. If we fail now to change the way of our life, the Angrat Schindler, they are going to get 1 bottle of oxygen in order to go out to work, like the people we use today, the mask for the coronavirus. But somebody said about that we have to stop all the also selling guns. And this is the Holy Father Francis challenge the leaders before to go to the Paris Global Agreement. If we stop selling guns and to guarantee the geographical territories of the countries, we have a lot of money in order to get the Sustainable Development Goals and to go for implementation of the Paris Global Agreement. Because today, all of us, we spend more than the available money we have. And we have to convince our brothers in Russia to sit down to find a peaceful solution. Because this is a fire which has come already to our place. Peace for everybody. And sorry for speaking so much.
Thank you so much. And I have another discussant who wants to take the floor. It's Jos Hut. Yeah. Please.
Okay. Madame la modératrice, merci. Sœurs, frères, mes chers amis, permettez-moi de...
Dear friends, I have to read a short message of our Master Kohani Samsaranda. We have met him in the past. First in French. The suffering is really deep, and let me say something. So, you see, from France and from Cambodia, myself, the suffering of people is very deep, and there is great compassion. Great compassion makes a peaceful heart. A peaceful heart makes a peaceful person. A peaceful person makes a peaceful family. A peaceful family makes a peaceful community. A peaceful community makes a peaceful nation. And a peaceful nation makes a peaceful world.
Another word,
And now I'll switch to English.
begins at home.
I repeat the same in English.
Ourselves, we protect the whole world. By loving ourselves, we love the whole world. When we say, may I be happy, we are speaking for everyone. The whole world is one. Life is one. We are all the same Buddha nature. And one more word. Men still banker only with the symptoms of their malady, remaining blind to the source of the illness, which is no other than the three strong roots of everything evil, pointed out by the Buddha: greed, hatred, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha. And the remedy is loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, what we call the middle path. Sadhu, Amen. Merci beaucoup.
Grazie mille.
Thank you so much. And I think that at this point, as all young people were really so good and listened so carefully, I think time has come to give them the floor. The floor is all yours. Do you want to make questions or comments? You have 2 roving mics. So please use the roving mic. Be bold. So who is going to break the ice? The first question is always the hardest.
Alors, je vois pas. Je vois rien.
They don't want to speak. We don't have anyone.
I don't know.
Okay, I can.
You can tease them.
I can choose it. Yes.
I giovani vanno via, fate un altro giro rapido dei panelisti, no? Ci avete mezz'ora.
I can try actually.
I giovani non hanno più voce oggi.
So, young people do not want to take the floor? You have nothing to tell us? Come on.
Tutti i punti di vista devono condividere qua.
Of course, we're here to share all different views, so just waiting for you. Grab a mic. While you're waiting and thinking about it, I give the floor again to Juan.
What prefer, English or Spanish? Spanish? Okay. Ayer escoltamos a jefes de 2 estados.
We have just heard the heads of 2 states belonging to NATO, the President of the Italian Republic and the French President. I was deeply struck by what I heard. They seem to be the guardians of peace and civilization. I want to ask you a question. The question is to you all, but especially to the young people. Have NATO, the United States, Europe, done what is enough in order to avoid war or to prevent, to stop war? Do they think they have acted enough, Europe, United States, NATO, in order to fight against climate change, against inequalities, against colonialism? What do you think? Do you think that what they have done is enough?
Entonces, para mí la respuesta es obvia.
So, the answer for me is obvious.
Todo lo contrario.
They didn't do enough. They, on the contrary, they are responsible of war, of climate change, of inequalities, of colonialism. But we can change that. Pope Francis has talked to the people's movement. The future of humanity is not in the hands of leaders, of businessmen, politicians, or religious people. The future is in the hands of the poor, of the people, and I dare to say of young people and of women who organize themselves. It is very important, therefore, that we understand that it is not just a question of values, but it's a question of power. If the victims of this injustice are not empowered, there will be no change. And one way to change the situation is grabbing the mic and talk. That's why it's so important that a young boy or a young girl express his own views of the reality.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Vedo una mano che si, bravo.
I see someone raising his hands. Very good.
Dove va questo? Aspetta.
Giovane.
Andare lì? No.
Allora,
Ok.
sappiamo tutto che la giovinezza è nel cuore, quindi...
Sono molto emozionata.
Si può presentare?
Vado? Sì, vado.
Qui al manco?
No, qua, però direi...
Okay. Can I stand here and talk?
Allora, aspetta.
Salve a tutti. Sono un po'
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I would like to ask a question about peace.
più o meno avete parlato del
You talked about raising awareness of the Russian government and Ukrainian government in order to reach peace. How do you think that we, young people, can achieve this goal or can try to raise awareness to our government's awareness?
Sensibilizzare il governo. Chi è che
So,
vuole rispondere a questa?
Trying to influence our government, who wants to answer? What can the young people do?
You want to answer the question?
Compañeros, le digo nada más una palabra.
Vado a dare la parola
I will give the floor, first of all, to Pakile and then to Juan.
Allora, non ho una risposta univoca.
Actually, I don't have just one absolute and unequivocal answer.
Della mia esperienza.
But I would like to start from my own experience. Government is not an individual. Government is an institution. And institutions like to listen to other institutions. They do not usually listen to the individuals, to the people. So I think that young people can raise their government's awareness on some issues by organizing themselves in movement, non-violent movements. Like, for example, the community of Sant'Egidio, since the beginning of the war, organized the March for Peace. Schools, young people organizations can take positive actions. They can raise their voices and talking to the government.
Grazie. Sì. Uniti si fa sentir meglio, l'avevano già detto qualche parte.
United is better, some panelists said this morning. And now I take the floor to Juan. I know only one way to raise awareness, one way. Taking the streets massively, thousands of people, millions of people taking the streets. There's no other way.
Grazie per questa risposta.
Thank you for your answer. Very clear, very short, very effective. So, I think that the first broke the ice, so let's listen to the lady who wanted to talk.
First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers. Very concrete proposals. It was not blah, blah, blah. Really, thank you. I'm Patrizia Burattini, and I am a member of the Sant'Egidio community. just recently I became a member, and I wanted to speak about what emerged with our Buddhist friend from Cambodia. He mentioned family, and family is a theme that is part of human ecology as a more general theme. We know that children are really very vulnerable, especially newborn in the womb of the woman. Legalized abortion was discussed with all people against and for clandestine abortion, where people could do it in paying high price and others had to pay with their life, was a topic that really was quite divisive. And we know that when a newborn is conceived, if we leave it grow, it becomes a human being and is born. We cannot ignore Mother Nature. The child can be delivered and be then adopted by a family without children. We have to protect a new life. This is part and parcel of human life, and also war and peace, because even if we have legalized abortion, we are really doing violence. It's a hypocrisy on the part of the state to say that we want to help women when we are leaving these women completely alone, without the father of the child, without society supporting her, because the problem of abortion is a problem of missed maternity, missed motherhood. It's not only an individual problem, but a problem concerning the whole society and the whole world. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Other questions? So, a boy who's coming to the podium. Round of applause. Girls. I want also girls, not only boys. So the future is in our hands.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. Secondo voi, come stiamo procedendo?
How are we doing in accomplishing the 2030 agenda? Are we doing well or are we late?
Allora, è vero che questo Agenda 23
So the 2030 agenda
SDGs, no?
with 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals,
è sempre nell'agenda
is in the agenda of the United Nations.
sta andando come
And it goes how it can. But I wanted to ask panelists,
questo agenda è
do you think that the UN agenda is
è giusto?
relevant? Is it right?
Come lo si può migliorare?
How can we improve it? Is it going well? How can we improve it? How can we improve the agenda and its development and implementation? Who would like to answer? The European Commission perhaps would like to say something about the 2030 agenda. would you like to say something?
Precise question, and the precise answer is we are not only late, we are very late. It's going badly. If we want to be honest, over the past 3 years, and that was not the least an effect of COVID, of the pandemic, we have less international cooperation than before. We have more egoism. We have more short-sightedness. And we're losing out of our sight those mid-term objectives. So we need to have a new dynamism. I was invited half a year ago to a debate in the European Parliament in Brussels about the Sustainable Development Goals. For me, this was a wake-up call, because the members of the Parliament asked me, Michael, what do the SDGs mean to you? And I had to admit that for my daily work, they didn't mean anything. I did not wake up in the morning to check, am I still on track in my area of responsibility to achieving those goals? For example, the right to education, the right to clean water, the right to energy, and so forth. I did not. So it was a very important wake-up call. I'm not sure whether the figure 2030 has ever been meant to be realistic, but I think we have to have these realistic or unrealistic goals in order to know where we are heading. So the answer to your question is the SDGs will be as realistic as there is a movement in the people, in the society, towards them. If we are not pressing, if we are not pushing, if you're not pressing and pushing, if you don't hold people like me to account, it will not happen. Because it requires that we go out of our daily comfort zone. It requires that we change our policies, but also our personal behavior. None of us in this room can continue to live as we are used to live, in my case already for many decades, in your cases, as you are mostly younger for a very short time, if we want to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. So it is a huge wake-up call. And if we want to attain them, if we want to come to a better ratio, and I refer to what Rabbi Rosen said, if we want to not consume 7 times the resources that we are due to consume, we need to be aware of that. We need to create the public for that. We need to discuss it. We need to admit that we are on the wrong track personally and as organizations, and we have to start to do it differently. When I listened to here this morning, I was wondering whether I should have come to this conference yesterday using ITA Airlines and going back tonight with Brussels Airlines. My ecological footprint to attend this conference is absolutely awful. I have sinned against the resources that we have. This is a little reflection on my level, but I think we all need to have our reflection. It's very good to have the long-term vision, but the vision is a marathon, and the first step starts today and starts in everybody's life.
C'è un'altra domanda. Ah, una ragazza.
There's another question, a girl.
Hello. I'm Julia, and I will speak in English. So, yeah. Hello, everybody. I am from Ukraine. My country in the last few months is quite famous. You know, you speak a lot about peace and how to help us to, you know, to stop it, the war, and so on. But at the same time, I want to tell you the thing that I see as a young person from that country. First of all, there are a lot of people who are right now in the war as the soldiers, and I have a possibility also to speak here because there are people who are all the time serving there and give me security for my family. Second thing, there are people who are going to the Western Ukrainian, and the Western Ukrainian are giving them houses and so on, because we have all the time inside migration. The third thing, there are people who are going to the Europe, to the USA and other countries to look for the peace, for solution to heal their life. And, you know, right now also there is also high risk of atom and so on. And a lot of people are asking us, you know, how we're feeling and so on, and you're approaching also that it's important to speak about peace. But at the same time, I am not sure how I, as a young person who is trying to exist in the whole reality, could do it. And I have a question to you. How do you think we can solve a problem, for example, of the atom, you with us, with the young people from the different countries? How do you see the proper solution? Because, to be honest, I'm not sure that we have a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Juan, you want to answer, Mr. Grabois? Or Mr. Sedile, or Mr. Grabois, Mr. Sudendra? Peace? No atom. You mentioned the banning of atom.
I congratulate this young girl from Ukraine for asking the most important question facing humanity. Nuclear weapons. Not just the use of nuclear weapons, not just the threat to use nuclear weapons, but even possession of nuclear weapons and production of nuclear weapons is a sin against humanity. And it is young people like you who must raise your voices for complete, irreversible elimination of all nuclear weapons, irrespective of whether it is this country or that country. And I'm saying this, friends, because I come from India, the land of the Buddha, the land of Mahatma Gandhi, and I'm ashamed that my country, India, also joined the club of nuclear weapon possessing nations. So let's raise our voice, whether it's USA, China, Russia, France. The president of France was there yesterday. He was speaking about peace, good, but we must, the international community must urge all these countries to set a deadline to eliminate all nuclear weapons. Otherwise, humanity will not survive.
Thank you. Grazie, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Oh, we have many questions. Okay, the last one here, please.
La mia domanda in realtà erano una serie di perché.
My question is just a series of why. Why? The main why is why are we going backwards? Time is running out, but we still rely on things happened in the past. So we are making step backward in the environment, for example. We use coal-powered plants, and we are going backwards in the field of civil rights. We are going backwards in all the fields where we achieved something. Why? That's my main question. I'm wondering also, why don't we have democratically elected institutions acting for the sake of the people and not for the sake of the individuals or of the big international companies or of those who control everything on the earth? I would like to ask you not what can we do, but what should we expect from the future? Because you always say that we are the future, we have to be the change maker, but we cannot expect us to reach power positions in order to fight something and change something. We can just take the streets and raise our voice, but change must start from the conscience of the adult people, because we can just be a voice, but we have not concrete chances to change the situation. I want to thank you all because you are here with us today. You talk to us, sharing your views and your experience. Thank you all.
Allora, il mio orologio dice 12:30.
So it's 12:30. Do we close here?
C'è ancora una. Allì. Prego, la signora.
We still have one request for the floor.
I'm an Italian student, and I have a question for you. So if we start to behave in the right way for our word, it will be possible to come back and to have our word safe 100%, without damage, permanent damage. Ok, mi sarà ripetuto in italiano. Stavo dicendo, se praticamente noi ci iniziamo a...
If we start behaving well for our world, the world around us, is it possible that we do not cause permanent damage if we all behave well from now, so that we do not cause permanent damage for the climate and for the planet? This was the question. Perhaps it was not clear when I said it in English.
Yo pienso, no, porque en algunos momentos se habló del antropoceno.
We talked about anthropogenetic responsibility. It's a lie.
Tu conducta individual, mi conducta individual.
My behavior, my individual behavior, your individual behavior has to change. But if the system doesn't change, the system ruled by the big corporations that pollute the world, nothing will change. Nothing will change. It's a lie. It's not a problem of recycling garbage. This is just greenwashing and brainwashing where they want. They want that us, we the victims, are those responsible for the disaster creating by 1% of humanity. Thank you.
Sì, allora, Pachile vuol dirci qualche parola.
Pachile want to add something, but then we will end.
Rispetto alla prima domanda,
I want to answer the previous question,
è molto centrato sulla pace.
which was about peace.
Secondo me,
I think
ogni persona celebra che vediamo,
that
medico,
doctors, scientists,
settore,
famous people, well-known people,
cambiare qualcosa.
had one day changed something, personally, individually, on his or her way of working or living. Sant'Egidio community has always believed that the world can change when each individual wants and starts to change.
La questione della guerra non si risolve solo
War cannot be solved only by the top down. But the war starts in families, starts in the neighborhoods, every day. Just think that every night in Rome, there are about 60 people in a week meeting those who are homeless, those who have not food, those who have not documents of health problems. Peace starts also there. Peace is in each one of us. We can change the United Nations. It's important. But if those who are in the institutions do not believe in what they say, do not change, we will always demand change.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, to all of you, and join me in giving a big round of applause to all our panelists for this morning.